Um, Hi, do we hear each other?
Yep.
Okay, hello. I have a little bit of a technical issue, so if you can give me just a moment to figure it out. All right. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode and next meeting of AI Talks by now, Tarek. Today's topic is key challenges of generative AI adoption in 2024. I know this is the time that everyone is trying to give you some predictions about the new year that has just started, but uh, we have a very unique opportunity to hear the perspective from Matt Lewis. I met Matt at the Generative AI Summit in London last year, and he impressed me greatly with his um, mm, analytical approach and very holistic view at the intersect of technology and well-being, health, and medicine. We've discussed quite a lot about mental health, and it was an extremely valuable conversation. And later on, I learned that Matt is a life sciences visionary, augmented intelligence futurist, and human-centric innovator. And he acts as a global chief of artificial and augmented intelligence at Inizio Medical. Inizio Medical is a company that helps pharmaceutical companies bring therapies and promote therapies in the market. Matt specializes in partnering with key stakeholders to speed up decision making for leveraging artificial intelligence, advanced analytic, digital innovation, and bespoke consultancy. Uh, when we discussed, Mark has been just transferring from innovation officer to AI officer, and that is something that I wanted to start with because when we were preparing for this webinar, you said that the leadership in artificial intelligence, meaning a head of AI or someone like that, is a key role in 2024 to move from exploring what generative AI is for us to actually leveraging its opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, I think 2023 was kind of a year of curiosity for many folks, where ChatGPT kind of came out of nowhere, and many teams and individuals and organizations didn't quite know what to expect. They certainly didn't have a budget line kind of set aside for generative AI. They'd never even kind of heard the phrase generative AI before. And it took some time for groups to kind of determine what role and at what level the artificial intelligence mandate, if you will, would sit within the organization. Some organizations, like mine, for example, elevated the function to the level of the C-suite and have a chief AI officer. And now there are a number of organizations that have a similar kind of consideration, where there is a C-suite level AI officer that reports to the divisional president or the head of the organization. And then a number of other organizations that are now considering how to approach that similar challenge, where um, historically you had a large focus on data science or data strategy and other kind of elements, but it wasn't necessarily kind of central to the way the company operated. And now with the introduction of generative AI and other elements that are kind of more kind of transformative, having a kind of closer seat at the table is kind of becoming apparent. So I think you'll probably see a lot more of that in this year, not just in private corporations, but also in a lot of other walks of life, like in the government and not for profits and other settings, as the kind of relative role of AI becomes more prominent and conspicuous.
So, in your opinion, um, there is a change in the way that the technology part of the company is structured. So until now, all the technology was in the hands of chief technology officer. But you're saying that it's time for the head of AI to report directly to the head of company. Why is that important?
And not necessarily the a change in the technology side per se. I think there are a number of organizations where the CTO suite can certainly still stay intact, as it were, and both the CIO suite and the CTO suite have their own kind of evolutionary paths to consider as things are evolving quite quickly within their space as well. That being said, the while organizations might have like a chief data and analytics officer or someone that has responsibility for data, often it's the case that those types of responsibilities and projects, um, whether they report up to like a CTO or CIO or some other organization within the business, they tend to have responsibility for things that are kind of a component of the organization, but they're not necessarily central to the organization itself. And having line of sight responsibility for the strategic affairs of the organization itself is part of the mandate of most chief artificial intelligence officers. Again, both within industry as well as within government roles. And when I say government, I mean government within Europe, government in the U.S., government in other parts of the world. If you're going to be advancing the kind of strategic imperatives of the organization, kind of helping to see oversees regulation or legislation or the mandate of the organization, having it be a subservient role under another kind of C-suite position where it's tactical or kind of implementing someone else's vision, it becomes very difficult to really kind of put forward and kind of progress the organization's expectations in such a position. It really does need to be a direct line consideration. That is different than from having been a chief data analytics officer, which I was in a role like that for 6 years prior to being in this role, because while you are still implementing large scale data science projects, which all AI projects are essentially data science projects, the intention of them, their expectation is to transform the business to help the business realize against its strategic objectives, if you will, which is not always the case for core data science projects. And to have that as a expectation and a consideration means not just kind of the accountability, but having visibility to other members of the leadership team and having the ability to understand what the organization's remit is and how to kind of solve against it. So it really does require it being a senior level position, if you will, and also the accountability that comes with that. When projects are complete, they have to deliver against an expectation that is hard and fast in terms of accountability. There have to be numbers that are assigned to it that matter for the business in terms of either revenue or margin or other things that are of import for the organization. And there are things that are not just kind of data science considerations, but business considerations. So it is a different, qualitatively different role and expectation than the roles that kind of precede it, like a chief data analytics officer type of role, which some people have been in prior to being in this role. Not everyone necessarily goes from being in a CDAO role to being in this role. People come from all kind of walks of life before they're in this type of spot. But you do hear from folks that are in CDAO type roles that I really want to be a CAIO. How do I go from one to the other? Or isn't it just the same thing? And no, it's not the same thing. And you can't just kind of retitle yourself or add the AI piece on and kind of start doing the job. It's there might be some concordance, if you will. There might be some overlap between the two types of work, but it's very little, maybe 10-20%, not 90%.
Oh, I would have guessed much more, but so what I'm understanding is that um, there's an acceleration in the way we have to innovate since the growth of generative AI. What I mean is, you mentioned almost every area of the company being touched by the artificial intelligence, and until now, it was kind of silos. So we were implementing CRM, then we were implementing ATS, then we were implementing ERP. So these were kind of a standalone solutions for a certain problem. But now artificial intelligence comes across every part of the company, becoming a part of its DNA. So, what would you say um, is the next step for a company that has experimented a little bit with generative AI, sees the potential for themselves in this area? Maybe it's a production company and they created this agent that helps service people perform their duties, picking up the straight answers from manuals and previous service actions. So they know it's valuable. They did the prototype, they tested it, but they know that this is just like this first step of creating a solution to one problem with
Yeah.
the use of this technology. This will not embed AI in their DNA. So what is their next step towards being really an AI driven organization?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like the type of organization you mentioned is in the kind of vast minority at present. There aren't many organizations that are doing things like what you described right now. That will change over time, as things progress forward. But when you look across like the adoption curve of generative AI, for example, we're still in very early days. You think about who has actually adopted generative AI within the enterprise. We're still in kind of early adopter, early majority kind of realm, if you will, where maybe 3 to 9% of all companies have actually done experiments with generative AI at this point. So less than 10%, less than 1/10 of all companies have actually implemented some form of generative AI within their organization. So the example you just provided is like the vast minority of companies that have actually done something and implemented it fully. But let's just say that someone has done that. It is an important component of their ability to progress forward on the maturity curve of being able to recognize what's possible and then scale it across the business. But it is a part. Another large part is to have the expectation across the organization that this is something that is desired by leadership and that the business sees as valued. And this is another reason why the chief AI officer has to live up at the senior leadership level, not like reporting to a CTO or a CDAO, if you will, or something within that stack, because the head of the company has to get out and indicate across the entire organization that in order to be successful in Christmas of 2027, in 2028, or even to be relevant in 2030, that the organization has to transform vis-a-vis AI. That to still be competitive in that space means partnering, collaborating, and being synergistic with AI. That to not do that means obsolescence, or to be outcompeted by other organizations in the space. And that needs to come from not so much folks in my role, the chief AI officer role, but from the CEO, from the divisional president, from other members of the C-suite, the staff, the rank and file staff need to hear from their leadership that success is conditional upon integration and collaboration with AI across the business. And that needs to come through in things like HR policies, in IT policies, in how the business works, so that they understand when they potentially want to experiment internally with generative AI, whether it's using Midjourney or Dolly for graphic design, or they want to use the off the shelf ChatGPT, for example, for asking a question, that they're not going to get their wrist slapped, because by doing so is against the corporate code of conduct, or they're not being encouraged to kind of have that sense of curiosity. They need to know that that's expected and desired, and that that's encouraged within that organization. So there is a piece that sits within the organizational leadership about what good looks like in terms of value and experimentation that needs to be kind of enculturated across the organization. And then there's another kind of related piece that has to do more with professional development, strategic enablement, and what might be called upskilling, in terms of you can stand up something like what you just described. You can do an experiment on a piece of tech and demonstrate whether it works or not. But if the people that are actually responsible for it in their role don't understand what it's doing, they don't understand how it can be incorporated into their workflow, they don't understand how to use it when it's actually finally validated or how it changes their KPIs, their professional development goals, how they talk to their direct reports, how they talk to their customers. They don't know how to actually make it come to life. It doesn't matter how good and effective it is in the kind of workbench in the learning laboratory. It may as well not exist. There has to be a full campaign, a full effort to focus on the fundamentals of education for all staff, everyone from entry level staff right out of university all the way through senior executive staff, so people understand what has changed mechanistically, what is important with regards to this kind of cascade, if you will, and how that shifts their work, so that maybe now they treat this type of intervention that you've just described kind of as a co-pilot, for example, or as a colleague. What does that mean for them in their work? How does it shift their expectations? What does it mean in the future? How do they cultivate that kind of sense of knowledge and curiosity as things progress? And those expectations of education and curricular kind of knowledge, if you will, become part of the organization's remit as things progress forward. Just kind of throwing across a new piece of tech and kind of hoping that it is successful and validated and scaled is not sufficient. Is it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. You do then have to also think, once that education is in place and that people know kind of why we're doing it and it's the right thing for the business and all the rest, how to take it from the team that validated it and scale it across the whole organization. But that's important as well. But just doing that and not doing the rest is not going to be a helpful exercise for the organization at present.
So what I'm hearing is that basically there are two things that are ahead of us. Firstly, is the like growing the awareness of uh, what are the use cases and how can I improve my work using artificial intelligence, and secondly, embedding the use of artificial intelligence in the company culture on every level of company employee, so they know that they are a part of the organism that consists of them people being one system and AI being a part of that same system integrally. So when I look at it, it reminds me the same thing that we've been over and over again since implementations of CRMs through digital transformation, data transformation, where with the growth of impact of these technologies, meaning AI has more impact than a CRM on the company. Um, what I see is that the importance of embedding it in the company culture and really making employees a part of the process or even the center of the process is becoming essential because the technology grows faster than we are able to adopt it. So would you say that those cultural challenges are the top one priority this year, so that people really open up to how they can leverage existing tools to learn that AI is a part of their daily routine?
Yeah, I mean, I think nothing nothing works in AI, whether you call that artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence, as we refer to it, without people. Like, people are the sine qua non of AI, regardless of which way you approach it. And it's different than, say, again, the chief data analytics and analytics officer type of role, in that in 2024 you have a situation where all our people, in any company, whether they're in a life sciences organization like all the teams with whom we work, or they're in finance, or they're in telecom, or they're in defense, or they have luxury automobiles, or whatever they do for a living. It doesn't matter. They're still people. When you stand up an artificial intelligence project in their workplace, you don't have the luxury like you used to have in a data science environment, where you could come in and do a natural language processing project back in 2012, 2013, 2014, and they could focus on that intently at work, and then they could go home and sit on the couch and watch Netflix or television and be completely kind of divorced from that type of engagement. Now in 2024, the entire world is awash in artificial intelligence. whether they're watching on TV, a deep fake related to a political election, which about 1/5 of the world's countries are involved in some type of election involving generative media and synthetic
Yeah,
media.
of half of the population.
Yeah, most of the world will experience, AI through the election cycle this year, or through music, or through sports, or through other activities. You can't get away from AI. It's not like, with the things we did with analytics and with, data science in the last 5, 10 years, where you could just kind of keep it in the workplace, and then at home you had a separate kind of consideration. Now it's everywhere. So the people that come to your offices, that show up at your jobs and do your work, they have their own kind of preconceived notions about what AI can and can't do. And also, they have fears, and they have hopes, and they have dreams, and they have wishes and aspirations and considerations. They're real people about where it fits for them. So when they start seeing what it does in the workplace, whether it's with a platform or with a tool or an application, you have to think about what that means and how you bring them to it, because they don't come as a tabula rasa, as a blank slate. They come with a lot of ideas about where they go with that in mind. So those things matter with regards to training. They matter with regards to engagement. They matter in terms of, they show up for an experiment, for example, internally, where you might want to test the use of a particular platform, maybe that leverages machine learning or deep learning or Gen AI, and they might come to it thinking, hey, like if I do this app could take my job away, or it can make an example of my likeness into something like what I saw in that political ad. So it's not an environment that is kind of free from noise like it was 5, 7, 9, 12 years ago. It is a very crowded space, both for the mind space of our staff, as well as trying to create value for the different organizations with whom we work. And we have to be cognizant of that into the ways that we try to kind of move things forward, and try to help in different situations.
Yeah, you mentioned an important thing that comes over and over again, the fact that it takes jobs. So, uh, reducing FTEs engaged in the process is one of the easiest and most captivating, value capturing strategies when you first implement a new technology, generative AI specifically. So, imagine a company when you have 20 content writers that are basically creating product descriptions for the e-commerce page over and over again for different languages, different versions, A/B testing, etc., etc. And we start using generative AI for that. So we reduce the FTEs from 20 to maybe 4. What those 16 people will be doing?
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
till now it was usually that we saved someone's time and we had some other areas where he could put a valuable impact and together with the technology create a leverage on some process. But right here, in many, in not in all, but in many use cases, uh, the employee becomes obsolete. How do
I
you
have
tackle
I
that?
haven't seen that in any vertical that I've observed, not in spaces that we're in, and not spaces that I've seen, in talking to other experts. It does come up in discussions like this, or in the trade press, or out in journalism type blogs and the rest. In the real world, though, that's not what happens. In the real world, what really happens is that a particular challenge exists. Like, for example, in our space, trying to communicate the salient benefits, the features and benefits around the use of a molecule, say for depression or bipolar, or for lung cancer or for lupus. And the way in which that's done today, which might be fully human, is only able to solve against, say, 40 or 60 or 90% of the salient, concerns that might be relevant for rheumatologists or psychiatrists or oncologists or whatever might be the case. And when you juxtapose an augmented intelligence consideration, that is, you add generative AI to the mix, perhaps your impact improves 4%, or your time to delivery decreases by a week, or you're able to increase the volume of considerations from, instead of getting 15 options for the client to consider, now you have 150. So you're able to kind of widen the aperture, or improve the diversity of options that are open for consideration. So the quality goes up, the time to delivery goes down, and ultimately the benefit for patients and clinicians and others, improves. But I have not seen in the 14 months since ChatGPT has come into the world any teams that have been exited. I haven't seen large layoffs. I haven't seen people leaving the space, because the challenges that exist to solve and create value are still paramount. It's the work is becoming more complex and it's becoming more nuanced, because the things that we hadn't been able to do historically with just people now are possible, and we can stretch beyond that and start doing greater, faster, more impactful things. But it's not like, oh yeah, we checked that box, we did those 15 things, we're done, let's just go home and have a beer. That's not what happens. Like, the work gets more complex, and we're able to kind of go from kind of a single channel environment to a multi-channel environment to an omni-channel environment to really ensuring that people have the right content at the right time and that they make decisions effectively, if you will. And it augments our ability to improve decisions. It's not like we added and all of a sudden people are like, oh, you know what? We don't need these people. That just doesn't happen.
So yeah, but like you're saying about the situation right now, so coming closer to the medical industry, there are thousands of people that are producing content for leaflets for the meds, right? There are whole companies that are writing leaflets and marketing content for the pharmaceuticals. If you start using generative AI for that, you will cut those FTEs. If not within a year, then within 5 years. You will get to the point where your AI agent will be at least as efficient and risk uh, acceptable uh, as a human being in the role. And I'm talking about those situations like uh, will it uncover some other areas where those people will be available, or that means that in certain industries there will be an overwhelming need for transformation from one role to a different one.
I don't know the answer to that question, Matt. I tell you I don't have a crystal ball, but I actually do have one. It's over here at my desk, but it's not very effective, my crystal ball. But I actually do have one from other work that I've done. But I'll tell you, like, no one knows the answer to that question. But if you look at your example, patient information leaflets, and you look at leaflets in different countries, like say you look at them in Poland, you look at them in London, you look at them in the US, there are lots of poor examples of PILs, patient information leaflets. And I say this as a patient. I'm myself a patient. The PIL kind of production is nowhere close to optimal. There are lots of bad examples of what patient information leaflets look like, the way they're produced in your country versus the way they're produced in the Great Britain environment versus how they're produced in the United States. They all suck to some degree. So when you start thinking about adding in generative AI to their production, the first thing my mind goes to, and that a lot of people's minds go to, is not getting rid of the humans. Although, honestly, if I was a patient thinking about the production and consumption of this content, I would think about how the information in those deliverables is actually being considered in support of a decision that might need to be made. Like, for example, the medication that's associated with the leaflet and whether or not I'm taking it the appropriate way, and whether I'm using it with other options that may exist, other medications that might be prescribed, et cetera, whether it's friendly, there's graphics, it's in all the rest. And the rules between Poland and Great Britain and Ireland and the US, they're all different. So you have the same medication in different places, even if the medication is the same, the actual output looks completely different. So having Gen AI involved in those considerations would be quite helpful, actually, just to improve the quality, not to push out the humans that are involved in the development of them, but just improve the quality of them so that they're readable, so that the people that interpret the content from them can understand how to use them in the context of their life. And then when that information is used, can they integrate that with other things that are relevant for them, for their disease and for their challenges? So, and that's what you tend to see with a lot of the augmented intelligence considerations, this improvement in quality. And then also, I'll tell you, for most PILs, which is the case for almost all scientific medical content and most technical content anywhere, there's a huge backlog. So, if there's a PIL that just got published for, say, Spravato for treatment resistant depression, there's another 20 projects for other products that are sitting in the hopper waiting to be written because there aren't enough people to write them to get them out to people that actually have these conditions and these drugs. So while the question you pose is about what happens to people that are writing them now, the bigger question is how do we get the backlog of things that are pending publication to actually get to people that are suffering from actual illnesses to be written so that they have something to use. And those are things that can be solved against by complementing and by enhancing and by extending and by augmenting with generative AI so that people that actually have real challenges have real solutions in the form of produced patient information leaflets that they can actually parse and interpret. And maybe over some long period of time, like 3, 5, 7 years, you'll find that working between a human and an AI, that's more efficient and more effective and the quality goes up and maybe you don't need as many people as you have today. But that's not a question most people are asking in January 2024.
So basically, what you're saying is that there's so much more place for improvement and so big shortage of workforce right now that the increasing capabilities that will come with generative AI adoption is not enough to consume the FTEs and free them, but would rather be consumed by the increased efficiency, more personalization, better quality, more user and customer experience, etc. Right?
I didn't say that. The way you said it is much better than the way I said it. But yes, that is where things are today. I mean, certainly as the models improve and as there's greater adoption, people see what's possible. I could see your scenario playing out, but that's not what most people are talking about in today's environment.
And that goes much along with Bolu Oladini's question and comment. He said that it's now more important for people to become more strategic or innovative since generative AI is great at drafting content. And he sees people moving forward, supervising or reviewing generative AI output. And that's actually something very, very interesting because when you look at one of the biggest challenge that the company is looking at when implementing generative AI, especially when the content goes outside of the organization, is compliance. And compliance not only with regulations that are written and said and understood, but also there is too little regulations, so we don't know how to prepare ourselves for the future. And at the same time, you are responsible also for what this Gen AI agent produce. To make an example, Mid-Journey in the very early days had a problem because people were using it to generate child porn. Even though it wasn't illegal because no child was involved in that, you don't want your tool to be used in that way. So you need a way to validate if something that goes out of your AI tool is something that you want to sign under and say, yes, this is my content. I take responsibility for that. How do you see the involvement in that? Is this the opportunity for the humans to be viable in the process of creation now with generative AI?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of paramount with our approach with augmented intelligence. We don't see any place for the platform, the tool, the algorithm to kind of take the lead on really anything, whether it's graphics or video or images or content. It's always going to be the human that both architects the expectation as well as validates it before it comes forward to a team or ultimately an audience. The comment that was raised by Bolu, is definitely apropos. I mean, I think it's always been the case that especially in medical disciplines, that one of the major roles of teams like ours is to kind of help determine what's actually relevant to interpret and to analyze. It's still the case with generative AI content that's essential and paramount. And a lot of teams are using kind of like off the shelf Gen AI, like ChatGPT, enterprise licenses and the rest, or things that they just kind of download without any real kind of training. So a lot of what emerges from those models is not really purpose built and not specific to their needs. So there is a lot of work that needs to go on with humans still to make sure that what comes forward before it's actually engaging an audience is appropriate. It also you don't necessarily get released from or freed from an expectation of being innovative or strategic just because Gen AI is kind of around, as it were. I think if anything, that there's probably a greater need for some of those expectations within the business, because the types of problems that are really being solved for by generative AI tend to be the things that the business wants to pursue or achieve, that are closest to their strategic plan, which is why I said earlier that the role has to be a kind of high level position, because it tends to be that the types of projects that Gen AI tends to solve against are things that have already been kind of done and designed, so to speak, that have been drafted by the leadership team and say, these are problems that we have as a business, or these are objectives we want to pursue. Which of these are actually amenable to intervention by generative AI versus which are things that perhaps can be solved by other means. And as a result, it might be that there's a team that's assigned to support them that has a Gen AI approach to doing that, but it's that they cart following the horse type of thing. Like, you need to figure out what your problems are first, and then figuring out how to solve them, rather than just kind of sprinkling some AI on it and hoping that it'll work.
Yeah, and that goes with one more sentence from Bolu's comment that this may require more learning, unlearning, and flexibility. And I think that this is very untouched area that AI will greatly impact the role of people and talent management, or HR, as I hate to say, because we will be introducing new roles. We will be transitioning people from one role to another. We will completely change the onboarding, offboarding, and the training that goes along with your advancement in the career. So this will be a part of the company DNA to adjust yourself to AI with the way your role changes. And that means that I think the roles in the company will be less and less strictly divided, meaning I had a graphic designer, then I had a have a content writer, then I have an editor, and then I have a web designer, and these are four people involved when I want to go from, hey, let's write an article, to the moment when it's published on the blog and integrated with all of our upselling and cross-selling and content promotion strategies, etc., etc. But with the use of artificial intelligence, maybe I will have one person that manages the whole flow, because when they need the graphics, they have Dolly. When they need to improve their content, they have ChatGPT. When they want to publish it on a website, hey, there are AI tools that are embedding things right now in a very neat website automatically, which means that it will pull people to the more strategic point of view, where they are responsible for the outcome of some content that is being brought, rather than the production of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. I mean, I think it'll really depend upon a number of factors, especially within life sciences. I mean, one of the problems that exists within the use of tools like the ones you've suggested is that if you don't have a lot of subject matter expertise, like to the question raised by Bolu and others that are in the audience, if you don't come from a clinical environment, you don't come from a postdoc, if you will, and you come in like right off the street without any real experience, you can't really leverage Midjourney, Dolly, ChatGPT, other platforms to a degree that is helpful for the actual work that needs to get done. You can use them, but the outputs are not that helpful. Likewise, if you're in an environment where you've been in the role for 20 plus years and you have a kind of established work process, the published research that exists in this space, like that comes out of Ethan Mollick's group and BCG and others and the rest, demonstrates that the marginal returns in that environment of being in role for 20 plus years is not that high. And most people that benefit from the things you mentioned, Matt, are mid-career professionals. So you do need some subject matter expertise, and you do also need to have some flexibility, some agility, some learning, unlearning flexibility to be able to adapt it and adopt it within your environment. It's not like you just walk in kind of like, oh, here's my Midjourney, here's my ChatGPT, here's my other platform, and here's your final product. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way, not yet anyway. Maybe again with a couple more model upgrades and additional considerations will be in that environment, but not today. So it might be possible, but it's a little bit of a challenge because what actually is the case now is that folks that come into, say, like a graphic design environment with a deep in understanding and expertise that end up developing proficiency in those platforms like Midjourney or some of the Adobe suite or other platforms are able to force multiply their expertise to the point that they're significantly more expert and capable than folks that don't have that exposure. But then to then work through some of the kind of copy only tools or some of the tools that are involved in other modalities, it's like, again, back to the law of diminishing returns. That they could do it, but the value is not as great as just staying stuck in on the modality that they know so well and are extremely expert in. So I mean, it's you have to kind of think about how to organize talent in an environment where people's competencies and performance are significantly greater than what they were in yesteryear, and what's best for the deliverable. I mean, again, it's not so much about whether it can be done, but whether it should be done.
So wouldn't you say that that it will enable smaller teams to perform certain tasks or to take responsibility for certain areas as smaller teams, because generative AI will help them produce some of the resources that they need to perform their duties?
I didn't say that. I said that the teams that already have expertise that pick up augmented expertise in a particular platform like Midjourney or Dali or another platform, they can produce both a greater quantity of work, and the quality of work that emerges from that exercise is greater than what they can do alone. And that's
I understand. So you're saying that the benefit of being an expert in creating graphics is so big that even with the Mid Journey, a good graphic designer with a Mid Journey will be an advantage over a person that can use both Mid Journey and ChatGPT and some other tools, being more, let's say, more strategic, right?
that's what the published research has shown thus far. I mean, it's definitely likely that as 2024 continues to roll on, that we'll see some new data, new studies that bear out additional research that perhaps goes in different directions. But as 2023 yielded out, most of the research suggests that you do need subject matter expertise to make the platform sing. You can't just come into it with a person off the street and expect brilliance. But once you have deep in subject matter expertise and learn how to use the platforms well, you can greatly improve your efficiency. Now, I'm not saying, either to your comment or the question I see here in the feed, that means that you need less people, because the person that becomes more effective is essentially shortening the time to proficiency in their own career path. So if they were essentially on a path where they're hypothetically a senior designer, and then they are versatile in a number of the generative AI platforms that exist, whether it's Wonder Dynamics or Midjourney or Firefly or whatever it is, and they are able to produce brilliant work as a result of generative consideration. Now they themselves are much more effective and also more efficient than they could have been otherwise. It doesn't mean that the organization needs to hire two less people because that person is a stronger contributor. It means that when that person is leading a team or contributing to a deliverable, that the work product is going to sing.
So I see that we have a difference in a perspective. You're saying that things will stay more or less the same when it comes to the division of work, but the efficiency and the will grow rapidly. From my perspective, there will be a shift towards more generalist position where specialized work will be performed by AI. But as I'm thinking about it, there is a chance that we are both right. What I'm saying is that every technology implementation goes with cycles that are centralizing and decentralizing. What beats a huge Amazon marketplace is a very specialized shop with cigars. What beats a very specialized shop with cigars is a big shop with cigars, whiskey, and coffee. And what I'm saying through that is that maybe it will go with the same path, saying, okay, right now we are trying to use a very general tool, ChatGPT, one for all. I'm asking the question you're answering. I'm using
Yeah,
prompting to give you a little bit of narrow context, but you're a very generalist employee of mine, the
yeah, yeah,
AI. But then you will specialize, and you have this Mid Journey, this Dali, things that are very specialized. And maybe that will pulsate, saying, okay, now we're going for the general implementation. Then it's the specialization, as you described, senior designer with Mid Journey beats that. And then again, it evolves to, okay, let's integrate it together.
yeah. I think you're right. I do think that your kind of approach is probably likely to happen in more organizations globally than what I'm putting forward, if you will. But it might be that in by the size of the organization, like that is that bigger companies are more likely to kind of have a model more like what I've suggested, just because of the way they're structured and how they have to kind of produce certain types of tasks and deliverables. Another consideration is that the more specialized you get, if you will, using generative, it becomes harder and harder to justify the kind of traditional ways of working. That is, it's if you, for example, if in the old world, like in 2022, if you used to do a thing and it took you 20 hours, and now in post generative world, like in January 24, the same thing can be done in 20 minutes that usually took you 20 hours. After a time, most people will start asking, how should I use the 19 hours and 40 minutes that I used to spend on the same task? Most intelligent people will ask that question. And some people will use that 19 hours and 40 minutes of kind of save time to do that same thing another 100 times. I know people that have done that. I'm one of them. Some people will use that time to do things with their friends and family. Some people will use that time to go off and get another job in addition to the first job they already have. Some people will go off and change their job completely into doing something unrelated to what they were doing 18 months ago. But when you increase your efficiency by a factor of 20, 40, 100, and all your tasks become significantly less frictionful than they were 18 months ago, it's hard not to ask that question. And when you do it regularly, week on week, month on month, you start thinking, what do I need to change?
Yeah, and that wraps up with something I haven't seen in you at first when we started discussing, but as we had more conversations, I found out that you are a big optimist, seeing many more opportunities and much more enablement in this technology. uh, evolution, maybe from your perspective, rather than revolution?
Yeah, I can't comment on the latter, but I am a big optimist, and I think that there is a huge potential for the work that we're all involved in, that you're involved in, Matt, that Tarek is involved in, that we're involved in, that it just exists out in the world to help people, actual people, make their lives a little bit more enjoyable and hopefully a little bit less stressed potentially than has been the case for a really long time. I've seen it firsthand, and as this continues to progress forward, I think there's tremendous upside for a lot of people I work with, for friends, for family, people out in the world, to hopefully have a better kind of balanced disposition towards the way they work and the way they live as a result of what generative AI and augmented intelligence can put forward. And I am very optimistic about what's coming. But to get to that point is going to require some effort and some discipline on many of our parts, because when you start asking that question that I just posed, sometimes the answers that come back are a little uncomfortable. But I think it's important that we have that conversation, because it's that we're right at that kind of like criticality, right at that point where the world is kind of like about to change, and we're kind of contributing to the conversation. So yeah, I am optimistic.
That's good to hear when someone that's so deep into the disruption that's going on is optimistic. It's always a good sign. So, Matt, from this conversation today about the challenges that are ahead of companies and enterprises that are implementing generative AI in 2024, I've learned a couple of things. Firstly, that you need leadership that is really empowered and goes across all of the verticals and silos in the company, that helps the company leader to transform it to an AI driven organization. I've learned that the challenge in 2024 is more in the company culture, in the talent management, in the unlearning, learning, and relearning processes rather than on the technological side. We very briefly mentioned that the compliance is a big challenge and a big question mark that no one has answered to yet. And we've had a really optimistic view on the fact that reducing time in performing tasks will not lead us to being obsolete in the market. So I believe that the conclusion is really optimistic. And
Yeah, I mean, those are all great
I think that
points.
has.
And yeah, no, sorry. I think those are all great points, and a great summary. The other thing I'd kind of harken back to, that is kind of where you started the conversation, Matt, which is with experimentation. And I think if folks that are tuning in, listening, watching now, or in a recorded fashion at a later point, take one thing away, it is really, from my perspective, around experimentation. I think last year, 2023, again, was kind of this like what's going on type of year. Like, it's exploratory, like but where did this come from? Like, now we're talking about ChatGPT all of a sudden. But if people really kind of do one thing in 2024, it's experiment. And you might be in an environment, you might be at a company where you don't have a chief AI officer yet, you don't have a CEO or a division president that has said, this matters to us yet. But that doesn't mean you can't experiment yourself individually. And I have seen firsthand, I've been a personal kind of beneficiary of this myself. I've seen colleagues, I've seen friends, family members that have taken on different generative AI applications and tried to kind of change the way they live. They do different things in their lives as a result of generative. And some of it doesn't go well. They get really frustrated with ChatGPT or other platforms, like, what the hell is this? But it's really important, really, really important from an AI literacy standpoint, that we all kind of understand what's possible and what's not, and potentially see some value in our personal lives. So even if it can't be, professional, it can't be, to Matt's earlier point about an ERP platform or something that gets stood up to, kind of implement broadly across the enterprise. Take the time to look into applications that might be useful for different aspects of your personal life, whether it's managing email or looking into sampling music, like I do some of that on the side, or other things that are of interest to you, because learning how to do that stuff now will pay dividends later and be useful in the things we pursue professionally. So I think that's something that is worthwhile thinking about at present.
That is an amazing advice, and I'm very glad that you mentioned that this will be the year of experimentation. This is what we help with as Neoteric, to experiment with generative AI implementations for organizations. And for everyone that took part in this webinar, I invite you to reach out to us and get your free invitation for a generative AI exploratory workshop, where in a couple of hours you will be able to find out what kind of use cases are worth pursuing for you, and how can you actually turn the hypothesis that Gen AI will help you in certain area to the moment where you are sure that it will happen and you know how to proceed with the implementation to really capture the value that you identified. So thank you, Matt, for today's conversation. It was really valuable for me. I learned a lot. Hope that our audience did as well, and probably see you somewhere in the world on a conference. It will be a pleasure as always.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for the time.
Thank you.
Bye.